Welcome back to our channel where we provide updates and undisclosed narratives on Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. We are excited to share the following news. King Charles's final verdict after IRS investigates Archewell exposed Harry and Meghan's lies. There has been a recent termination of the collaboration between Netflix and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. However, this is not only a Hollywood project that was unsuccessful. Rather, it is a public accusation of negligent financial behavior, which is supported by a whopping $20 million claim for compensation. During the time when the Internal Revenue Service is purportedly investigating their charity foundation, a far more serious danger is emerging from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. A vengeful king and a determined future ruler are getting ready to deliver a decision that will be very terrible. The Montecito Mirage, an inside look at the financial collapse and the royal ultimatum's threat to eliminate the United States of America. However, the news did not arrive in Hollywood in the form of a whisper, but rather as an orchestrated explosion. The intimidating co-CEO of Netflix, Ted Sarandos, a guy who built a worldwide empire on ruthless efficiency, had formally broken connections with Archewell Productions. Archewell Productions was the company that he had been working with. On the other hand, the termination was not couched in the kind, face-saving language of creative disagreements, which is very usual in the sector. Instead, a statement that was icy, precise, and completely devastating was issued by an insider who remained unnamed, but was obviously authorized to speak for Netflix. With the intention of aggressively pursuing the recovery of $20 million in advance cash, the streaming behemoth decided to freeze all projects, including Meghan's much-anticipated lifestyle series. Although the declared reasons were terrible, the subtext was even more clear. The Sussex brand had become radioactive. The claimed reasons were tax difficulties and a looming IRS inquiry. The announcement of this cooperation in September 2020 was met with the type of worldwide excitement that is often reserved for state visits. This was the spectacular collapse of a relationship. The arrangement, which was estimated to be worth an astounding $100 million, was intended to serve as the foundation for Harry and Meghan's new, independent existence. It was intended to provide them with a platform to become the global storytellers that Sarandos himself had earlier hailed. They promised material that would inspire and bring people together, as well as films that would provoke thinking and thought-provoking programming for families. On the other hand, in the years that followed, the production was not a torrent, but rather a trickle. The only big projects that were able to come to fruition were a documentary series on the Invictus Games and a profoundly intimate and controversial look into their departure from the royal family. The situation behind the scenes, on the other hand, was very different. It was a narrative of projects that were not moving forward, costs that were inflating, and a growing sense of concern inside Netflix's compliance departments. There were angry confrontations, with Sarandos personally leading the effort, according to sources who were close to the tense final discussions. It was not only a commercial choice, it was also a decision that had to do with one's image and morals. In a society that has moved on from Enron and Weinstein, powerful firms cannot afford to be involved with partners whose ethics are in doubt. It was alleged that Netflix's internal audits, which were carried out over the course of many months, had found a complex web of financial hiddenness inside the Archewell ecosystem. It was a scream that had arisen out of the whispers of unlawful deductions, dubious philanthropic tie-ins, and a purposeful blurring of borders between personal enrichment and production expenses. The purported investigation by the IRS was the last straw. Not only was the operation of the Sussexes inefficient, but it had also become a liability for Sarandos, a man who had established his kingdom on the basis of data-driven choices and a hard work ethic. The message that was sent by the clawback of $20 million was harsh and unequivocal. Our relationship of trust was violated, and we want our money back. The structure of dishonesty and deception. When attempting to comprehend the magnitude of the catastrophe that has engulfed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, it is necessary to go beyond the glitz and glitter of Hollywood and into the purposefully opaque world of non-profit fundraising in the United States. The Archewell Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of the marriage, and its complex, almost symbiotic connection with their for-profit production firm, are at the center of the dispute. The charges point to a system that was so ingeniously created that it teetered perilously on the brink of legality. It was a complex shell game that was played with millions of dollars in contributions and corporate advances. Legally, the foundation is required to comply with the stringent regulations set out by the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. A benevolent, educational, or scientific objective must be the driving force behind its operations, and the profits it generates must not profit any private shareholder or person in an unfair manner. Providing public trust in return for tax exemption is the primary covenant that governs charitable organizations. On the other hand, there are credible sources who assert Archewell served less as a conventional charitable organization and more as a personal slush fund and a vehicle for brand advancement. There are reports that the Internal Revenue Service is focusing its investigation on a pattern of activity that seems to regard charity funding as a handy subsidy for the couple's extravagant lifestyle and business endeavors. The use of donor-advised funds, often known as DAFs, is one of the primary techniques that is being investigated. Donors are able to earn an instant tax credit via these charitable giving vehicles, which are maintained by a third party. Donors may then suggest distributions from the fund over the course of time. Despite the fact that DAFs are completely within the law, there have been long-standing criticisms that they may serve as black money loopholes for the very affluent. These loopholes conceal the origin of gifts and let monies accumulate for years without being given to charitable organizations that are actively working. According to reports, Archewell amassed millions of dollars via DAFs, including a sizable sum of $2 million from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. At this point, the investigators are investigating the most important questions. Were these gifts made in a lawful and impartial manner? Or were they, as some insiders have argued, a vehicle for the Sussexes or their close associates to cycle their own money through the system, essentially washing it in order to exaggerate their charity credentials and maximize their tax deductions at the same time? A claim that is even more outrageous is the one that involves the purported double-dipping arrangement with Netflix. The Archewell Foundation would then deduct some of those same expenses through the Archewell Foundation as philanthropic outreach, according to a source familiar with Archewell's operations. The source claimed that Archewell would bill Netflix for content development costs, such as travel for a humanitarian trip that doubled as a location scout for a documentary. In the event that this is accurate, it is not only brilliant accounting. Rather, it is a classic example of the type of financial deception that garners significant attention from the federal government. It is possible that Archewell may be subject to harsh penalties, which may include devastating back taxes and fines, as well as the entire removal of its non-profit registration, which would be a move that would publicly mark it as a scheme. The tax returns for the year 2024, which revealed earnings of more than $5 million, but expenditures that were excessively skewed toward administrative overhead, wages, and travel, only served to stoke the flames of controversy. While the group's founders' public appearances, which often took place at award ceremonies at which they were the beneficiaries, were registered as charity activities, Critics pointed out that the organization barely fulfilled the minimal 5% yearly asset distribution requirement that was mandated by the Internal Revenue Service. According to the words of one financial expert, it was a visibility vehicle, which meant that it was designed for appearances rather than effect. A kingdom that is in peril. An entirely different type of tempest was forming behind the historic walls of Buckingham Palace at the same time as the financial storm clouds were gathering over the state of California. It has not gone unnoticed by the British monarchy, which is an institution for which maintaining the appearance of integrity is not a question of public relations, but rather of survival, that charges of financial misconduct and the possibility of an inquiry by the IRS have been making headlines. The response from the highest levels has been one of genuine worry, according to palace sources, which culminated in a demand that was both clear and explicit from King Charles III himself. It has been claimed that the king has made a call across the Atlantic Ocean to his youngest son. The message that he leaves for his son is devoid of any fatherly tenderness and is delivered with the icy authority of a king. According to sources, Charles has requested that Harry and Meghan immediately suspend all operations relating to their royal-sounding fund and commission a thorough and complete audit in order to present the truth to the royal family in its purest form. This is not a recommendation. Rather, it is an edict from the king. Within the context of the king's reign, this is a problem that strikes at the very core of his authority. The last thing that he can afford is for a senior member of his family, even if it is a member who does not work, to get involved in a huge financial scandal on foreign land. He rose to the throne with the promise of reducing the size of the monarchy and restoring public faith after decades of scandals. The very word Archewell, which is an intentional echo of their son's name and has implications of royalty, inevitably connects their efforts back to the crown from the very beginning. This very moment confronts Charles with a predicament that is both dreadful and excruciating. As a father, he is known to have a profound affection for Harry, even if it is frequently strained. He is famous for concluding his address to the nation upon the death of the Queen with the words, "I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas." However, as king, his duty is not to his son, but rather to the institution that he now embodies. It is common practice to refer to the monarchy as the firm, and it functions according to a straightforward and uncompromising principle: the protection of the crown above all else. It is vital to manage, control, or, if necessary, remove any person who poses a danger to the organization's stability, regardless of where they are in the line of succession. The historical examples are quite similar. As far back as the abdication crisis of 1936, when Edward VIII was forced to choose between the throne and his love for a divorced wife, and as far forward as the more recent scandals surrounding Prince Andrew's association with Jeffrey Epstein, the royal family has always taken decisive action to cauterize wounds that threaten the entire body. This past is something that King Charles is very aware of. He is aware that if he were to allow the Archewell scandal to continue to fester, it would not only be detrimental to his son's image, but it would also provide ammunition to the increasing Republican movement in the United Kingdom and more generally across the Commonwealth. It is a frantic effort on his part to get ahead of the narrative, to impose some sort of control, and to determine just how much harm has been done. His demand for an audit follows this desperate attempt. Nevertheless, it is also a resounding indication that the family's patience has now reached its limit. From this point on, the king is not requesting an explanation. Rather, he is seeking a reckoning. Ultimate performance of the prince. It is possible that King Charles is motivated by the need of a monarch to control a growing crisis. Nevertheless, The response from his successor, the Prince of Wales, is said to be forged from a different and more robust metal. This is not simply another controversy for Prince William. Rather, it is the ultimate betrayal of the institution that he has devoted his whole life to safeguarding. He is encouraging his father to give a last, clear warning to the Sussexes, according to accounts from insiders, and William is reportedly lobbying for a far more severe reaction. The stance that he takes is quite clear. If the audits and investigations establish that Harry and Meghan engaged in purposeful deceit and financial wrongdoing, then they must appear before a royal court and be permanently prohibited from entering the United Kingdom. According to reports, this ultimatum signifies the ultimate and most tragic breach in the bond that existed between the two brothers. As a future king, William has gradually embraced the attitude of a chief executive officer and the curator of a brand that has been around for 1,000 years. The recent claims of financial impropriety are, in his opinion, a breach of a different order than the public assaults that Harry and Meghan waged against the royal family. He watched with increasing rage as they conducted their attacks. This is not about personal complaints or family drama. Rather, it is about the possibility that the conduct of the Sussexes would do irreversible and systematic harm to the image of the crown in terms of its integrity. The notion that a prince of the United Kingdom and his wife may be utilizing a charity with royal connotations to reportedly operate a sophisticated grift is incompatible with all that William stands for. Both of them are members of the royal family. Invocation of the notion of a royal court is powerfully symbolic, despite the fact that the term itself is antiquated. It implies a formal internal decision that is distinct from any legal processes that may take place in the Republic of the United States. Rather than being a trial of law, it would be a test of honor, loyalty, and suitability to wield a royal title, among other things. According to William's proposal, the result would be tantamount to the contemporary equivalent of exile. Although it is not possible for the British government to legally prevent a citizen such as Harry from entering the nation, the monarchy has the ability to deprive them of all remaining rights, titles, and royal protections, thereby rendering them personae non gratae inside the United Kingdom. It was not by law that they would be banished. Rather, it would be by royal edict. This action would permanently cut off all of their remaining links to the nation in which Harry was born. William has developed from an elder brother into a potential future monarch, and this uncompromising position reflects that maturation. It is no longer enough for him to cope with a misbehaving sister. He must also contend with a rebellious element that poses a risk to the security of his anticipated empire. The long-term health of the monarchy that he will one day govern, as well as the overall public opinion of the monarchy, is his top concern. The public's faith in the institution's core goodness is essential to the institution's continued existence, and he is possibly the person who knows this more than anyone else. It is possible that the claims made against Archewell would disprove that idea, so tarnishing the royal brand with the stain of ordinary avarice rather than the brush of public service. This is the point at which William has crossed the line. It is no longer possible to reconcile differences. When it comes to judgment, the moment has come. The human cost of an empire that is taken down. In addition to the seismic vibrations that were felt in Hollywood boardrooms and royal palaces, the Archewell story has left a path of human ruin in its wake. Not only are the high-profile departures and allegations of a poisonous work environment footnotes in a business drama, but they are also testaments to the tremendous human toll that was exacted upon individuals who joined the orbit of the Sussexes. In a consistent and unsettling manner, former employees ranging from top executives to home assistants have drawn a picture of a workplace that is characterized by disorder, entitlement, and a striking lack of leadership. Archewell's revolving door has become a well-known phenomenon in the business, with estimates indicating that more than 20 important employees have left the company in only 5 years. This exodus is not only a result of excessive turnover. Rather, it is a manifestation of a dysfunction that is deeply rooted. Insiders have described a milieu that is always in a state of crisis, where the petulant moods of Prince Harry and Meghan's uncontrollable drive to be right have generated an atmosphere of anxiety and weariness. One story that was especially damning indicated that it was like working for kids. The statement cited a habit of blaming others for failures, continual mind changes, and a total lack of strategic direction. It was said that projects would be reorganized on a whim, often based on late-night messages and frantic emails, leaving whole teams scurrying to keep up with demands that were inconsistent and unstable. According to reports, this leadership style, or lack thereof, was typified by an outlandish blend of micromanagement and absentee ownership. Despite the fact that she was utterly detached from the overall plan, it was stated that Meghan was obsessed with specific phrases in press releases. Both were accused of having what one former worker referred to as a superficial approach to leadership, which can be summed up by the devastating motto, "Show up for 15 minutes of photos, then leave." They expected miracles to occur without any meaningful input, delegating everything that could possibly be delegated, and then taking credit for the work that was done by others. A great example was the Spotify podcast titled Archetypes, in which, according to those with knowledge of the situation, more skilled women were responsible for doing the research and interviews. But Meghan swooped in to scoop up all the credit. The high-stakes, results-driven cultures of their partners at Netflix and Spotify were fiercely in conflict with this endemic sloth that was prevalent across the company. However, their employees were responsible for the majority of the expenses. "You are constantly second-guessing yourself," one former aide confided, "and pieces of work are never finished, so you never get any sense of achievement." This sentiment was echoed in the bullying investigations that began during their time in the royal fold, where staff were reportedly found slumped over desks in tears. The psychological impact of working in such an environment, one that strips away professional confidence and fosters a sense of futility, is immeasurable. It is possible that the greatest lasting legacy of Archewell will not be the material that it failed to generate, but rather the talent that it destroyed and the careers that it injured along the way. This is because the empire that they attempted to construct is now falling apart. The disintegration of. This was not an isolated occurrence. Rather, it was the plucking of a single thread that now threatens to unravel the whole, carefully crafted tapestry of the Sussex brand. The termination of the Netflix arrangement was not an isolated incident. The situation, which started out as a Hollywood reckoning, has now become a royal problem and an imminent legal struggle with the authority of the United States government. The story of caring global humanitarians, which was so fundamental to their identity after the royal family, is now crumbling under the weight of charges of greed, duplicity, and astounding entitlement. In addition to being unpredictable, the future of Harry and Meghan seems to be quite dangerous. Should the investigation by the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, substantiate the most serious charges, which include utilizing a charity as a slush fund, participating in a type of tax fraud, and double-dipping on costs, the penalties will be immediate and severe. Archewell would almost probably lose its tax-exempt status, which would be a public and embarrassing branding of their humanitarian endeavors as a failure. Legally, they may face millions of dollars in unpaid taxes and financial penalties. On the other hand, the harm to one's reputation would be complete and long-lasting. A permanent association would be established between the term grift and the Sussex brand. Former contributors, who were already moving away from the organization, would completely withdraw their support. In the future, the possibility of business collaborations would be unimaginable. At the end of the day, Who would put their own brand in danger by associating with individuals who are the subject of a federal investigation for financial misconduct? It is rather troubling that Ted Sarandos has created a precedent with his intentional action. In Hollywood, he has effectively banned the Sussexes, sending a clear message that their royal titles do not provide them shelter from the industry's core standards of accountability and professionalism about their conduct. He has done this by practically banning them. Additional tales from disillusioned former lovers and workers are now being released, and each one adds another crack to the facade that is deteriorating. Now that the floodgates have been opened, an ever-increasing quantity of tales are being released into the world. The silence that the couple has maintained in the face of these shocking allegations is deafening, and it is not seen to be a dignified reserve, but rather an admission of guilt. The monarchy is preparing for the consequences of the event as it is taking place on the other side of the Atlantic. King Charles's demand for an audit and Prince William's alleged ultimatum are not just threats. Rather, they represent the first steps in a process of institutional self-preservation. Both of these demands are quite serious. In the event that the allegations are proven to be true, the royal family will be left with little choice but to openly and formally disassociate themselves from the matter. The removal of Harry and Meghan from their remaining titles and the severing of any residual links to the crown would very certainly be the consequence of this. In addition to being kicked out of the family, they would also be kicked out of the identity that has given them the chance to be heard on a global scale. This would be a double punishment for them. The narrative of Harry and Meghan was once a fairy tale, but it eventually morphed into a drama about disobedience. Once upon a time, the situation is rapidly deteriorating into a tragedy that they have fabricated for themselves. It is a cautionary tale that illustrates how a yearning for freedom, when divorced from responsibility and truth, may not lead to a golden kingdom in the sun of California, but rather to a lonely exile that they have imposed on themselves without any outside influence. The truth, which is uncompromising and dreadful, is growing closer, and it is getting ready to knock everything to its knees. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.